In this video, we're going to add the new plugin options schema API introduced in Gatsby 2.25 to a pre-existing Gatsby source plugin. This new API allows plugin authors to define a schema in which plugin config options must validate with. So let's dive right in. Now this new API was introduced very recently in Gatsby 2.25, and it works with Joy, which is a popular JavaScript validation library. Now this allows us to essentially create an instance of Joy with specific keys that map to plugin config options and ensure that they conform to a specific type, whether they are required, and so on and so on. So right now we're going to look at updating this source plugin, which I'm the author of, Gatsby Source Printful. We're going to add the new plugin options schema API so that we can ensure that people provide the correct options when using the plugin. Now currently the plugin actually uses a method to somewhat validate plugin options, and that's using the pre-bootstrap API. And from there we're just able to access the plugin options and ensure that certain config values are valid, i.e. they are present and they are of the correct type. However, the new API will essentially bypass all of that, and we can just define the schema that we expect, and Gatsby will take care of the rest during the build process. So let's go ahead and add that now. So as with all Gatsby Node APIs, we're just writing an exports function inside of Gatsby Node file, and it's plugin options schema, and this takes a Joy instance that is available to us here. We're going to return a joy.object. Now within this Joy object, what we are actually going to do is actually define the keys that we're expecting inside of our config and stipulate whether they are a string, a number, and so on, and whether they're required, and if they have a default value, which is particularly useful. And all of this documentation is available on the Gatsby site. I'll put the link in the show notes or in the comments or the description. But all of this is really handy, particularly default values, because you have to kind of normally pass them throughout all of your Gatsby Node, functions and APIs. So let's go ahead and begin to design our Joy object and what our schema should look like. Now this is a pretty simple source plugin. It only actually expects two options, or it only accepts two options. One of those is the API key for actually interfacing with Printful, and another is the Pagination Limit, which works when querying for data from there, so we're not overloading their API. So to start, we're just going to add the API key, and of course that will be a string. So we use the string method on the Joy instance, and of course that is required. And there's no default value there, because that's obviously on a per case basis. You have to provide your unique API key when using this plugin. That's great. So we'll test that out. We'll add that now. We'll test that out. So if I save this, we're going to have to rebuild that. But importantly, right now, inside of our Gatsby config, inside of the demo, what we're going to do is we're just going to remove this API key value. Oh, we'll just comment it out actually, because we'll need it back in a minute. So now if I run yon dev, what we'll see is we'll actually see an error thrown in the console because that required config option is not provided to us. You can see it there. Invalid plugin options for Gatsby Source Printful. API key is required. Excellent. So that is because of the plugin options schema API. Next up is Pagination Limit. Now this is a number. It's not required, but we want to provide a default option. Now, if you notice, we're actually using this with default options, which is a function. And this is kind of like a workaround before that they introduced this API. And that allows you to essentially call for plugin options throughout your Gatsby node file. So in this case, we have Pagination Limit, and it's used throughout here. Now that we're implementing the plugin options schema API, this function will no longer be needed. Because we're providing this default here, it will be available or automatically assigned inside the plugin options in each of these APIs. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove the pre-bootstrap here. That's no longer needed. Look how much more concise and readable that is now. We know exactly what keys are expected or required, and we know exactly what we should expect them to be if not provided as well. Get rid of with default options. Yeah, we need to structure those. We'll just do that here. Excellent. So now that should be working as we expect. One thing that's probably worth doing is saying, yeah, so this is a number, the method number. We're essentially telling Joy that, you know, this should be a number provided here. If I, for example, was to say, just going to comment that. If I was, for example, say 100 like this will not work. Should get an error that it's expecting type number. Yep. Pagination limit must be a number. Now, what's good about Joy is it actually accepts strings that are numbers. So this will work. Because although it's a string type, it's actually still a number. And as you can see, that's past the schema validation there. So that's a really kind of basic introduction to the plugin options schema API. There's a lot more you can do with that. We can provide descriptions which are used inside of the schema, and they may also in future actually auto-generate plugin documentation, which would be really nice to see. And we can set default options, which we've looked at. And we can also actually add custom error messages, which is really nice. You know, if you wanted to be more descriptive with your error messages, we can use the messages method on that. But yeah, that's a really kind of basic introduction to the plugin option schema. I hope you really found this useful. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.